Good afternoon. My name is Ben Lewis and I'm here today with my colleagues Kahli Bourke and SUsie Roe. And the purpose of our presentation today is to discuss globalisation. What is it? How does it work? What are the factors affecting it? Today we're going to look specifically at international company Siemens and the factors affecting their global expansion and domination of the world market. Siemens, have they been globalised? Or are they a multinational company? And what changes can they make to improve their operational performance? So first we must look at what globalisation is. It is the movement of a business or investment out of the domestic market and into the global market. Globalisation allows businesses to reduce their transaction costs and improve their business in an economic sense. It allows the business to have a mixture of different employees who bring a range of skills and different personalities. So who are Siemens? Siemens is a German-based company started by one man, Werner Siemens, 170 years ago when he designed the pointer telegraph. Siemens developed a press that could make seamless insulation for copper wire. This development, combined with the pointer telegraph, marked two major milestones on the road toward modern telecommunication. Siemens was a visionary, and he could see the advantages of multinational trade, which came to fruition in 1853 when the company began to work in Russia and Britain. Today, Siemens is a group of companies that expands the globe and influences every part of our daily lives. With a turnover of $90 billion annually, the company employs over 450,000 people worldwide. But it hasn't been easy for the company, and history has shown that expansion has been met with challenges. Throughout the history of Siemens, the company has experienced contextual factors that have influenced the company's strategic thinking, such as loss of contracts and government support, civil unrest between countries, the two major world wars, and the economic and political collapse of Germany, which forced the closure of the factory doors in 1945. In order to recover from this, the company relocated two of its operations to Munich and Erlangen in 1949, where they could rebuild and expand the company while still maintaining profitability in the global economy. For companies looking to take the global step, there are a number of driving factors that must be considered. These include cultural, environmental, economic, social, and political factors. Each of these factors has the ability to hinder or foster relationships between countries. There are several contextual factors affecting Siemens as they operate in today's market, which include currency inflation, local needs and cultures, economic uncertainty, and profitability. Currency inflation. Inflation is the rate in which cost of goods and services rises annually in each country. Currency inflation is the result of a rising inflation rate compared to the country's currency against other nations. This is a critical factor for Siemens as it has a direct effect on their UK production costs against competition in the US market. Siemens found that it wasn't efficient to manufacture products in every country they service, so they made a strategic decision to centralise manufacturing. This provides cost efficiencies through economies of scale and shipping products anywhere within the Siemens Group worldwide. While currency inflation may rise between countries and varying global markets, Siemens believe that their service capability of providing high technical products and support gives them the advantage over cheaper products manufactured in the Asian markets. Local needs and cultures. There are several advantages to globalisation for the business expanding, such as increased sales, reduction of costs and access to finance and tax savings. For the consumer, lower prices, wider choices, and improved quality. And for the country, the potential for improved standards of living and increased democracy. However, there are also disadvantages. For the company, there's an increased competition and demanding consumers. For the consumer, there's standardisation. And for the country, exploitation and the loss of culture and identity. Maud Barlow said, "Many societies, particularly Indigenous peoples, view culture as their richest heritage. Without it, they have no roots, history, or soul. Its value is other than monetary. To commodify it is to destroy it. Meeting the needs of local customers while preserving local customs is a high priority for Siemens, as it forms an integral part of the company's mission. Understanding the local needs of both consumers and producers allows Siemens to develop certain cultures within the group. Increasingly, its expanse into other markets not only cements its place in the world market as a leading multinational company, but by expanding through acquisition, allows Siemens to purchase local businesses and their employees that understand the local market and culture. However, there are always concerns that with the increase in foreign trade, there is also an increase in threat to local-made products and producers, which ultimately lead to loss of jobs. Outsourcing of production to other countries makes good business sense, but can have a negative impact on the effect on the local economy of strong, financially stable countries. In Australia, for example, the free trade agreement signed with Thailand in 2005 saw the lifting of import tariffs on cars from Thailand. This resulted in Australia buying almost 2 million cars from Thailand, and, in return, Australia shipped just 100. As a result, the Australian car manufacturing industry is closing its doors, and with it, almost 50,000 jobs. Economic uncertainty. Economic uncertainty refers to the unstable, unpredictable economy of a country, sector, or region, and usually refers to the likelihood of negative economic events. There are several causes of uncertainty, such as political turmoil, for example, major wars, uncertain general elections, or major economical change, such as the United Kingdom leaving the EU, or the collapse of Greece's economy, or financial turmoil, such as stock market crashes and the global financial crisis of 2008. These have had a profound effect on consumers and business confidence. Siemens experienced this crippling effect in 1945, following World War II and the economic collapse of Germany. However, the history of the company has shown that they have gained stability through diversification. Diversifying across sectors means all their eggs are not in one basket, and they can balance their revenue streams. Diversifying across global regions also helps to stabilise the effect of uncertainty in a particular region. Heather Tarbert stated that the general consensus is that effective diversification can achieve an investing across either both regions or types. As it can be seen from this graph, Siemens have balanced their revenue streams across their regions. Globalisation is often seen as a mechanism for tapping into uncharted waters in order to gain an advantage over older style multinational competitors. The lure of increased revenue, reduced running cost and improved system processes can be a strong force. However, revenue can also be increased by specialisation, diversifying and expanding into more markets, or by supplying existing products and services into developing countries. According to Siemens' annual report, the 2020 vision sets their overarching goals. All of these goals are designed to expand, foster and streamline, which will aid in the overall profitability of the company. I will now hand over to Kahli, who will discuss alternative business practice options Siemens could adopt to improve organisational performance.
Thank you, Ben. As Ben has already identified, there are numerous contextual factors that have affected Siemens over their 160-year history. As you all know, in the 90s, Siemens undertook structural changes that reconstructed the company from 7 major business units into 15 smaller separate entities. The changes in the business structure allowed the branches to have more responsibility, to operate more flexibly, and to work more closely with the local markets. During this period, Siemens transformed from a company dealing with the public to a global competitor under significant pressure from shareholders. Throughout the 21st century, Siemens have been building their business portfolio by forming new companies, divestments, acquisitions, and the creation of joint ventures. While these actions may be considered as globalization, it is also possible to consider some of Siemens' actions as regionalization. Regionalization occurs when there is a concentration of economic activities within a specified region, for Siemens to improve the business and become more global. These suggestions include combining the knowledge of locals with global coordination, building a close relationship with nearby businesses, utilizing free trade agreements to minimize costs, build relationships with tax administrators and government agencies, improve transport of goods to reduce costs, utilize technology to communicate between the branches. I will now elaborate more on each of these business improvements. To combine the knowledge of locals with global coordination. This is a method that Siemens already utilizes by acquiring businesses and retaining staff with local knowledge and expertise. Siemens now have a diverse crew that have skills that were not previously available to the company. Combining local knowledge with global coordination helps Siemens to diversify their product range when they purchase companies that have a different product collection. Build close relationships with local businesses. As Siemens moves into different regions, it will be important for us to develop good relationships with local businesses, including suppliers. This will allow Siemens to negotiate preferential pricing deals for the components required for their products and to achieve better lead times, therefore minimizing the amount of inventory that they require to keep on hand. Free trade agreements. Free trade agreements have been developed to reduce the barriers between two or more countries. This allows industries to access markets that have not previously been available. This increases the reach of the products being sold and allows Siemens to purchase components at lower costs. In Australia, free trade agreements enable companies to purchase electronic components from China. Providing the components are not available from a local manufacturer in Australia, Siemens can apply for an exemption of duties. When the imported product will be exported within 12 months, Siemens can apply for a Tradex agreement, which exempts them from paying customs duties and GST, therefore reducing the cost of their product. Build relationships with tax administrators and government agencies. Each country has different laws regarding income tax, withholding tax, GST and VAT. There are different legislations relating to the payments of employees within the countries. It is essential that when Siemens are operating in different countries, we have specialist accounting support to ensure we are operating within the legislation. Connecting with government agencies and policymakers will assist us in keeping up to date with the legislation and helping us to make informed decisions. Improving the transport of goods to reduce costs. Transport of products and components is a large part of Siemens' annual expenses. Transport is also an essential part of globalization, which has become cheaper with the air and water freight. If Siemens concentrates on the following items to minimize the costs of shipping, it would make a significant effect, such as purchasing items in bulk, shipping full container loads via water for non-urgent deliveries, negotiating with suppliers, and the use of freight brokers such as Cargo Hound to achieve the best deals. Utilize technology to communicate between branches. Increased technology allows Siemens to communicate information easily between branches via email, Dropbox, and teleconferences. This allows information to be shared between high-level technicians and managers with minimal amounts of travel. If Siemens can adequately manage these styles of communication, it can reduce the need for additional high-level employees. All of the items I have just discussed are improvements that Siemens could introduce or further develop to increase the business. I will now hand over to Susie to allow her to discuss our recommendations.
Thanks to Kahli and Ben for the insights on globalisation and the alternatives available to Siemens. What I'll present to you now is the recommendations we have made. Siemens have a decision to make: become truly global or master the regionalisation model. If Siemens were to become a truly global organisation, there is a need to excel at the globalisation of production. Globalisation of production is the sourcing of goods and services from around the globe, which takes advantage of the differences in cost and the quality of production. This will ultimately lower the cost of production. Siemens have a solid basis for making this their area to excel. As Ben stated earlier, globalisation is the movement of a business or investment out of the domestic market and into the global market. Globalisation allows businesses to reduce their transaction costs and improve their business in an economic sense. It allows the business to have a mixture of different employees who bring a range of skills and different personalities. Globalisation can indicate a company's success in adapting its products or services to another market. The opportunity that presents itself for Siemens with a globalisation strategy is to take advantage of free trade agreements and looking at how Siemens transport their goods or parts throughout their supply chain. As Kahli stated earlier, the use of free trade agreements would allow for lower operating costs for Siemens, as components or parts can be purchased at lower prices. Free trade agreements also have a political significance for countries and companies alike, as it illustrates a desire for a closer relationship between the parties. And through globalisation, free trade agreements have increased in both political and economic significance. The advantage of making use of free trade agreements will allow Siemens to free the movement of capital and labour and promote greater competitiveness. The overall effect can be described as deep integration, which is a term the World Bank has adopted. This deep integration would see Siemens working in a different way with countries, as both company and country would create a symbiotic relationship that each has an interest in making the relationship work. Siemens' supply chain is another area that could improve with the globalisation strategy. Through globalisation, there is the opportunity to obtain lower sourcing costs and access to broader markets. With expanding the sourcing of components and parts comes another challenge of longer lead times, more complex supply chains, and higher risks. And the other component of the supply chain that will need to be addressed is the investment in manufacturing facilities in order to supply the supply chain, which, if this is done in countries where free trade agreements exist, it would be cost effective. Free trade agreements and reviewing the supply chain net would be the first arenas for the step into the globalisation strategy or model. Regionalisation, on the other hand, is when an organisation has firm-specific assets that are region-bound and can't be deployed worldwide. The car industry is an example of how an organisation can arrange its production on a macro-regional scale. The car industry has successfully made parts in different parts of the world and then shipped these parts to the facility making the car as a whole unit. This process is how Siemens is functioning now: production in different parts of the world, and then these parts are moved to the final production site. This process relies on the multinationals' internal and external supply chains. Prof contends that although literature suggests globalisation is occurring for organisations, the reality is that it's regionalisation. Our globe doesn't have the degree of homogeneity in customers' tastes, and so regionalisation allows for the local region to maintain their individual tastes. Interestingly, Prof hypothesises that in the long run, organisations will transition from regionalisation to globalisation. On a business unit level, the concept of a multi-regional economic setting would open up the possibilities for strengthening the advantages of low costs and differentiation. And this ability is presented through the establishment of a free trade agreement. So, after understanding what globalisation is, the alternatives to globalisation and their recommendations, what should Siemens do? It is our final recommendation that Siemens continue on with the strategy of regionalisation, until such point that they can transition to a globalisation strategy. There are efficiencies gained every day with the current model of a regionalised operation, but as the world changes and more free trade agreements are developed, there will be an opportunity for Siemens to move into a globalised operation, structure and model. Thank you.